All right, so start again with your name and what you do for the university.
I'm Mike Allen, I'm a professor in the Department of Communication.
And what kind of stuff do you do in that position?
Teach, write books, mostly.
All right. And I guess we'll do, what are the buildings built for? Used for?
Well, this complex is there's Green Hall, which was originally the library. And it's huge beams and leaded glass, and that sound dies there like you wouldn't believe. Johnson Hall was originally a female dorm for females. Now it's, of course, classrooms. Merrill was a classroom building originally, and had a big Merrill 131, which is a big mass lecture hall. Was originally the theater in the chapel. I mean, the big place where they could hold assemblies and religious things. And now it's half classroom, half offices. And Holton Hall used to be the dormitory, and had the grand entrance was there where, because it was women's college and it was a dormitory, that was where the dates would go and drive up, and there was a reception area there, still is, with a big kind of reception desk and little anterooms off to the side. And there's mostly administrative offices, although there are a few classrooms tucked away here and there.
Okay. And then tell me about Downer College.
Well, Downer College was founded, it was set here, and it was a women's college, mostly nursing. Kind of nursing was the intent of it. And eventually it moved up north, and St. Lawrence. It went up north somewhere, and then the land was essentially sold to the University of Wisconsin, and what became eventually the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, although we had the campus here and then we had the campus downtown.
And then could you say the part about how they wanted to destroy a lot of these buildings? Yeah,
they wanted to destroy these buildings, want to tear them down and replace them. And the alumni of the college, the women of Downer College, had these places all declared National Historic buildings, mostly because Eschweiler, who was a very famous, people are familiar with his prints, but he also was an architect. That was his big thing, as an architect. And he designed these buildings. You can see it in the stairwells or the water breaks or some of the other interesting features he has going on in the building. And they declared it National Historic, so it couldn't be torn down. It can be renovated. But basically, it's now preserved as a historic building.
All right. Could you tell me about a couple of the renovations?
Well, it used to be the chapel where originally when I came here, there was a big stage, elevated stage, and then there was actually a pulpit that you actually climbed to lecture out of. I went up in the pulpit and was lecturing from the pulpit. That's removed. I mean, they have now big screens on the back of the walls, now big screens, and then they have a console at the front, and they replaced all the chairs, so it looks more like a giant lecture hall, although it's got really big stained glass windows on the side, which is kind of an interesting combination of that. They used to be the ceilings in the rooms here were about 3 feet from where the drop tile is. They put the drop tile in to hide all of the conduits, electrical, plumbing, stuff that they've added over the years. They've taken out walls. This used to be where I am, combined with that office, used to be a classroom. So they basically cut another door over there, put a wall in, and this classroom became 2 offices. There used to be the classrooms across the way. They wanted to make them into what we call labs. So they took the 2 classrooms and cut the center out of each of the 2 classrooms to put in a control room, so we could put in cameras to record things. So we could have a master control room. They did that for the 3 labs. I mean, over the years, they've obviously taken out the showers. We no longer have showers. Although, if you notice, we've got some really big bathrooms in some of the places. The resident directors or the RA resident assistants rooms are no longer there. Each of the floors used to have a kitchen, and now those kitchens are now been converted to office space. Every so often you see kind of remnants of the old stuff, but most of the stuff's been converted to from being a dorm to a regular office kind of space. Although sometimes some of the quad rooms have cloak rooms, have actual closets in them, which of course you would never have in a modern office. So
Right. Let me see. Were there any renovations that you might have disagreed with, like something that could have been done better?
I don't know if I disagreed with the renovation as much as the university has a record of not of lack of maintenance. I mean, like when Nancy Zimfer was here, they decided they didn't like the signs on the walls of the room numbers, so they ripped off the old signs and put new signs on. And it was basically like 10 years before they ever repainted the walls. So the walls had these holes in them. Paint had been literally they'd ripped off things. And sometimes they put carpet in that makes no sense at all because you've got stuff that's running through it. You've got chairs that are on runners, and it just rips the carpeting up after 3 or 4 years. And we've got kitchen places where we have kitchen, and instead of putting tile in, which is water resistant, they put in carpet, and of course that just rots out eventually. I mean, it's what I call institutional. It's UW governmental institutional things where they do things, and you look at it and you go, that makes no sense at all, given what we're going to be using it for. But it's a government contract.
All right. And tell me about some of the things that are still original to the building.
Well, the original, if you go to the woodwork on the stairwells, the stairwell woodwork is original. The window seats in the stairways, they still have all the window seats, and that's absolutely original woodwork, well over 100 years old. They don't use the water spouts anymore, but if you look on the outside, there's gargoyles and there's dragons. And it used to be in the old days, the water was channeled, so it would run out the dragon's mouth during a storm. So you'd see, and there's a water break below. The green hall is still one of the most beautiful, probably, rooms in the entire complex, and the woodwork and the stained glass windows are just still amazing after 125 years. Though they grossly are in need of maintenance, but that's another. Finding somebody who can do that kind of work is probably next to impossible, given how old they are, and that kind of skill doesn't exist. If there are very few artisans who could actually do that kind of work anymore. So.
All right. And let me think. So when I was given a tour of the building, Sabrina said that a lot of the gargoyles were made to resemble like people from Downer College.
Well, or the town's the mayor and other. That's the rumor. I don't know if it's hard to know if it's true or not because I don't have enough. It's so long ago that I don't have pictures of the people to be able to compare it to. I mean, the only and you'll notice they kind of ran out of money or something because I tend to think that probably Johnson Hall was built first because it's the most ornate, and then as you move from Johnson to Merrill, by the time you get to Holton, it's less ornate. So I think my own kind of opinion is they probably started running short of money anyway. They started like, we'll just put the stuff up without all the ornate trappings. The only other thing unique about the building is the supposed ghost of Merrill Hall. In the maybe 1905, 1906, somewhere in that range, supposedly, one of the nursing students committed suicide in the top floor of the dorm. People have told me they've looked for the newspaper accounts and it doesn't appear. And then, of course, the conspiracy is, of course, the college kept it quiet. Didn't allow. Some of the graduate students over years, because mostly graduate students on that floor, have said they've heard rattling or seen a couple of seats that they've seen the ghost. Although I tend to think the noise of rats and other vermin over the years of maybe fanciful imaginations, but that's one of the kind of legends that lives on, which You know, it's not provable, not kind of a classic X-Files. You can't really prove it, so you have to choose to believe it or choose to not believe it.
Do you have any ghost stories?
Oh, about UW Milwaukee? No.
Okay.
No, I mean, you know, if there is a ghost, I haven't seen it. I'm not looking for a ghost. I mean, I think the ghost stories more relate to right now. For cost savings, they have the lights turn off when nobody is using the hallways. So you could be teaching in a class at night, particularly, and all the lights are off in the hallway. So you come on and you have to wave your arms and shout in the dark to try to get the lights to turn on. So that may be the most mysterious thing that I at least encounter in the building.
Okay. I've also heard about a ghost cat.
That rumor came later. I mean, I've heard, you know, that rumor comes about because in theory, the graduate students had a cat that, you know, I think they'd read perhaps too much Edgar Allan Poe, and the cat had gotten lost or was hunting mice and got trapped in one of the rooms. The fourth floor used to have hidden rooms because they were journalism and mass comm back then did photography, where they had dark rooms. So of course you have rooms that have no windows, and they're kind of hidden. You know, there's light don't come in and kind of half guarded. So and of course there's no door to the outside hallway. So and there are dead spaces, spaces that are kind of blocked off or hidden. For example, the fourth floor. We call it the fourth floor, even though there's not really a fourth floor, but there's an annex up at the top of kind of like the little in the center. If you go up the stairway, there's a block there, and behind it there supposedly is like a little attic maintenance space. And about my fourth year here, which would have been 1990 maybe, they fired the head janitor because apparently he had a love nest up there. He had keys to get past it, and he'd put a bed up there and was having his romantic assignations up there, and eventually got caught in kind of a scandal of employment. But there are because it's an old building, there are little tiny places like that are kind of forgotten or papered over, or every so often you hear about them, kind of thing.
Okay. Are there any more of those areas that you could point out?
Well, I mean, a lot of the areas now, because of the need for space, have been opened. I'm trying, you know, there were like little, if you went down to what used to be the mediation center, which used to be the computer lab, there's a stream of 4 rooms where one room has a door that leads to another room, and there's like a fourth room at the end. And of course, the fourth room at the end is really kind of a closet kind of thing. And so you see some of that. And so every so often, the room kind of becomes forgotten. Upstairs in what we now think of as 310 up in Johnson, it's a room that's got kind of an alcove to it, and they'd put a barrier up. And so every so often, behind the barrier is where the kitchen used to be. So by barrier, I mean it's just like almost like a little cardboard shunt, if you will. And everybody's like, oh, I forget. Oh, yeah, there's an area behind there somewhere. So there are like little odd areas that every so often get kind of forgotten, like little closets or things that made sense, 125, 130 years ago, but are kind of like lost and they don't show up really well in the blueprints. And because they're so small, nobody thinks about them as space. They're just kind of there, kind of things.
Okay. Could you talk a little bit about what used to be the media lab?
Oh, which one?
Downstairs in the basement.
Oh, well, when I first got here, it was a media lab, and it was also it was a computer lab. Under the old, God, those were about as dumb a computers as you could. Those are 1980s, very dumb computers hooked up to the mainframe. with line printers. I mean, this is something out of an old James Bond movie kind of thing. They had a media lab there, which had cameras that you could check out, and we're talking the old I don't know if it was VHS. They may have been reel to reel. They were either reel to reel or VHS, where you had cameras. Literally, they were shoulder mounted, and people they were like in the third. Yeah, they were in the third, and if you had a key, you could go in and check them out and do that. And of course, when they were doing journalism mass comm, they were running around. I don't, and that was after the era of when they developed films. I mean, cameras they developed, but that was a different. That was in the developing lab was in Johnson. The media lab was in the bottom of Merrill on the little annex that extends out the back on the ground floor. And that was one of those where they had just basically equipment to go in and you could sign out and check out kind of thing. So, past the computers. I mean, it was a very lonely, odd place because it was almost, it's one of those things, more of a storage area than anything else, really.
I'm just going to move over here because this camera does record in like 30-minute increments.
Oh, okay.
So I might have to interrupt you in the middle of speech and press record again.
Yeah.
We should be fine.
Okay.
So, what else? Could you talk about the old computer lab at the top of Holton?
Oh God. Oh, that was really old. That was only there about the first 3 or 4 years I was there, and it was the kind of thing where that was under the old mainframe, which was a Sperry. To give you an idea of how old that was, when I first came here, you were allowed 8. Your computer address, you were allowed 8 characters, because the Sperry old IBM would only allow 8 characters before you got to the @ sign. So that meant, like mine is Mikealle, because if I'd had to put the N on, it would have been 9. So I have no N. I mean, now of course you'd put, you'd do my first, last, middle initial, and other things. So it was the kind of thing where, and people had now almost everybody uses their name or a variation of their name, but we had Gandalf and Tiamat and Lantern and Supergirl and Superman. I mean, we had different people because they were allowed, 8 characters, so they would they would pick out, really strange, what we consider now a strange email address kinds of things. But that lab was one of those where you would be working on your computer, and you would send the printout up there. So it was really more of a printing station because nobody had. I mean, it saved you from walking all the way over to EMS. So they had literally a line. It was a line, and it was an old line printer, green bar line printer. And so for faculty, it was more. You less used the computer, and you more used the printer to print your things, because you were using SPSS on the mainframe, which is really kind of an interesting. Of course, students were working there on their projects because they had access to the computer. So that was the days before what we think of as the microcomputer or the laptop. I mean, there was no such thing as a laptop or a desktop. It was all, it was literally what we would call a dumb terminal. I mean, it was as dumb as there was no, you were accessing programming through a monochrome monitor. And the other thing it had, which was important back then, was it had an IBM card reader, which back then you didn't type your data into a file. You typed it on these cards, and you'd put this deck in, and it was an optical scanner, because the cards you punched holes in the cards, and so having a scanner there meant that it would read 1,000 cards in probably 15 seconds. So, yeah, that was old school.
Okay. Do you know like what kind of computers were in there?
Well, there were terminals. It would have been whatever was consistent with an IBM or a Sperry, because they were IBM. It was a Sperry. It was IBM. So it would have been whatever was consistent with that. I mean, literally, these were monochrome monitors. I mean, they were not. I wouldn't. Yeah, they were terminals, but basically all they were was they were hardwired to a mainframe with a monochrome monitor with a keyboard. I mean, it was not. They were, um, you know, they were about as dumb as you could get. I mean, so.
Okay. So a lot of the buildings of Downer College did end up getting demolished, like some of the smaller ones. Do you know anything about that?
Most of them were gone by the time I got here. I mean, there were arguments over, the ones like the little. It's now the Jewish Center right there. There was an argument whether or not that should be demolished or not, and they were, of course, what's the name behind? Not Bolton, but there were arguments literally about all these buildings about whether or not they should be ripped down because the renovation costs were quite going to be quite high. By the time I got here, I mean, pretty much the things had all been settled. They'd been ripped down or they'd been decided we're not going to rip them down. I mean, Holton is one of those. Holton, but Chapman is also another one of those where, Chapman was interesting because it used to actually be the residence for the president. Now, of course, it's only administrative offices, but it used to actually be a place where people lived. And of course, now it's just an administrative house. So.
Okay. Just gonna stop it.